No, we can't hear you, Wayne.
Um,
Okay, so we're going to move ahead. He'll jump on at the end. So today what we wanted to do was give you a kind of an update of where things are and talk about the process for economic injury loans. Those are those loans available to small businesses that have been affected by the COVID-19. Hold on. It's not wanting to forward my slides. How about that? So Greg has scheduled some additional webinars that we're going to do. So here are those dates. Again, we just learned of some changes this morning. So if you have the ability to tune in to one or more of these down the road, there will be 2 a week starting next week. We'll do Tuesday and Thursday, and the following week we will do Monday and Wednesday to provide the latest updates that we know. Things are changing quickly as far as some of the qualifications and waivers that are being issued, as well as ongoing issues with technology. So tune in if you can. So the basics, economic injury disaster loans are essentially our working capital loans. So what these are available to our small businesses, small agricultural cooperatives, and small aquaculture businesses, and most private nonprofit organizations. So the mention of the agricultural cooperatives and the small aquaculture businesses, to understand here is that in general, agriculture is not eligible for these loans. The exceptions are going to be those small co-ops and any kind of aquaculture, fish farms, turtle farms, crawfish. Don't think we have much of that in Kansas as far as crawfish goes. So these are businesses that are directly affected, the restaurants, hotels, things like that, people that offer services to those businesses that are closed or impacted, and then anybody that's down on that supply chain that's been impacted by this. So that could be generally just about everyone. So what we're looking for on these injury loans, credit history. So before anyone asks, we don't know what the minimum credit score is. That's kind of a moving target. We are aware that there have been some that have been declined, just kind of an auto decline because of credit score. But what we're telling folks, if that does happen to them, to get with the disaster center, the loan officer, and we'll see what we can work out. So we don't know, and they will not tell us what the minimum score is or what the range is. It is moving target. So the other thing is repayment. So we have to see that, you have a viable business and that you're going to be able to repay the loan over time. And then, of course, physically located in a declared county, which is all of the U.S. at this point. So the loans are for up to $2 million. What it is really, it's going to be 6 months of your working capital. So if you had, $2 million is your working capital for 6 months, you could get that much. The interest rates on these loans, it's 3.75 for small businesses. Nonprofits are 2.75. And you'll see that this says with terms up to 30 years. This is one of those recent changes I mentioned. The terms will be 30 years on all of these. And all payments will be automatically deferred for 12 months. So no payment for 12 months unless you want to. And but the thing to know is that the interest does start accruing from the time of disbursement. You must be a small business. And there's a way that folks can determine if they are using the North American Industry Classification System. And again, these are for working capital. It's your fixed debts, it's your payroll, it's notes that are due, it's your inventory, it's those sorts of things. This is not because your profit has been diminished. This is to keep the business viable during the time while the profits are diminished. So think of it as, paying your bills. It's not going to help expand businesses. So how is the amount calculated? So now this is something, this is not a situation where the business says, I need this much money. We SBA loan officers will offer based on your documentation. So what we're looking at is what are your actual operating expenses? And that is going to be part of the application process where you basically send in your schedule of liabilities. So we're looking to see what your monthly expenses are and to keep you open and in business, or maybe not necessarily open, but keep people on the payroll. And so that is, we're looking at 6 months of that. We're taking people's word for it at this point with what they provide. Although I will say that loans over 200,000 probably will require additional analysis. How will the funds be dispersed? And we learned, I believe yesterday or the day before, that this is going to be a payment rather than a disbursement or quarterly. Collateral. So anything that's $25,000 or less requires no collateral. So over $25,000, we're going to collateralize what we can through the business assets. At this time, SBA has made the decision that we will not secure real estate as collateral for these, including your personal residence. We do know that maybe there are already liens in place on some of the collateral because of existing loans. That's okay. SBA, it will take whatever position we can have. And we're not going to deny a loan simply for a lack of collateral. So the kinds of businesses that can apply, there's a whole lot. So anything that's, hotels, recreational, things that are in travel and tourism industry, manufacturers, sports vendors. One of the things that's a little different this time is we've got here owners of rental property. Typically, that's not someone that's eligible for regular SBA lending. So you can see a whole lot. I mean, travel agencies, wholesalers. Again, you have to be physically present in the disaster area, but that's all of the U.S. at this point. Ineligible, as I said, agricultural enterprises. So if there's some definitions in here, but basically what we heard from a presenter a couple of days ago was that if you feed it or water it, it's not ineligible. But the exceptions are going to be aquaculture, again, and small ag co-ops. Generally speaking, when we talk about the nonprofits, the religious organizations are not eligible, charitable organizations, and of course, anything gambling, casinos, racetracks, that sort of thing. But I will say also is that all of these go, stay tuned because, like I said, things are changing daily. How is this different? So there is not a bank involved in these SBA loans. This is coming directly from the U.S. Treasury. You apply directly to SBA. There is no bank involved in this process. There's no cost for applying. And if we offer a loan to you, you have no obligation to take it. You don't have to take it at all. You also don't have to take all of it. So, maybe we offer you $100,000 and you only want to take 75. That's fine. You work that out with your loan officer. Maybe you have an existing disaster loan from one of our previous events. You still qualify to get another disaster loan. This is a different disaster. And no, we cannot consolidate those two loans together. Basic filing requirements. It's going to be a completed loan application, which is SBA Form 5 for businesses. If it's a sole proprietor, it's actually the Form 5C. We're going to be looking for tax information authorization, which is the IRS Form 4506T. Basically, that's giving us permission to get your tax transcript from the IRS. That's going to have to come not only from the applicant business, but also the owners, the principals that have more than 20%, and any affiliates that are and affiliate businesses. One of the things that has changed and that we're waiving at this point is that complete copies of the most federal income tax return. This will only be required at application for nonprofits. Small businesses don't have to submit those when they actually apply. Now, they may have to submit them later. They submit it as part of the application packet. I talked about the schedule of liabilities. you can use your own if you have something that, you know, your bookkeeper has prepared, or we have a simple form that you can use to document your liabilities. And then a personal financial statement. And that's going to be basically for the owners, the principals, folks with more than 20%. I do have a note here that currently filing is not going to be available through the portal, the online portal. And what we are asking people to do is to email or mail those completed paper forms. And I've got in here later where you can get those forms and where to mail them and where you can email them. So other things that may be required. So we talked about if the loan is greater than 200,000, there may be additional documentation that gets asked for, or if there's some other things just to substantiate that the business is going to be viable and can return to business when this passes. You may need to provide complete copies, including all of the schedules for income tax returns for anybody that has ownership in the business, all of the partners, managers, managing members, and your affiliates. If you haven't filed the most recent tax return, then they're going to ask for a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet from that tax year. You possibly will need a current year-to-date profit and loss, and also the Form 1368, which is your monthly sales figures. So when it starts getting into some of those larger loans, there's another way to kind of look at that calculation of what your expenses are, and monthly sales figures will be part of that. So how to apply, and this is what's changed as of this morning. Currently, in the past, you would be able to apply, and some folks were able to apply already through the disaster loan portal. That is not currently available. So if you do go to this site, and you get a 404 error message, the first thing you can do is clear your browser cache so that you can actually see the site. And then once you see the site, you'll see the new message saying, please download these forms and either mail them to our processing center in Fort Worth, Texas, which the address is here, or you can email them to disasterloans@sba.gov. You also could call the customer service center, but you also could email any of us here. We've got all those forms downloaded and would be glad to just email them over to you. If you need help with these forms and looking at your financial records, any of our partners, the folks that are hosting this call, the SCORE volunteers, women's business centers, if you're close to those folks, veteran business outreach centers, and then we're also getting chambers of commerce up to speed so that they can help as well. And then here's the site where you can go and look for local assistance to find who is the one that's closest to you. So one of the things that we've been saying is submit your application as soon as possible. Even if you don't need the money right now, you might need it 2 months from now. And again, because there's no cost to apply, there's no obligation for you to take the loan, apply. You can always turn it down, but you've got that in your back pocket if you need it. Make sure that when you submit your application, you've done all of those forms, you've filled out every box you're required to and signed them. That's the biggest reason for delays of processing ends up being, missing information, or you didn't completely fill it out. So if you need help making sure that all your stuff is filled out and you have it complete, contact one of those resource partners or us and we can help. If for some reason your loan request is denied, you'll have up to 6 months to provide new information and submit a request for reconsideration. But what we do know is once you get into the process, those loan officers that are going to be working with you on your individual one are going to try to help you get through this. So if you clear your browser history and get to this site and see this, instead of clicking any of these buttons here, you can choose loan information where I have that big red arrow. That will take you right to the paper forms. So we're going to talk a little bit about the forms and not so much about how to do it through the portal, since that's not available right now. So once you click that loan information button, this is the screen you're going to see. It's going to tell you that the portal apply online function is not available. Here is the links to all of the forms that you're going to need for your initial application. So many of these you're able to fill out on your desktop electronically. Be sure that the ones that you have to sign, that you print them out and sign them. But here is the link to all of these, and you can email them to disasterloans@sba.gov, or you can mail them to the processing center in Fort Worth. I would say too is that most folks are going to need the SBA disaster business loan application list, which is the second list. If you are a sole proprietor, you need that form 5C. And again, this is not for any kind of physical damage to homes or anything like that, so you can skip all of that part. So here's what you got to have. You've got to have your Form 5 or 5C, which is the actual application, the tax authorization form for SBA to get the transcripts, and that's going to be for the business. That's going to be for the 20% or more owners, general partners, and anything that's a 50% affiliate. Most recent business tax returns, again, that's for nonprofits only. And a personal financial statement, which is, again, that's Form 413 that you can find on the site. And that's going to be, again, the same thing for your 20% owners and your general partners. Schedule of liabilities, you can use our form, you can upload your own. So we're going to skip ahead and look. So this is the Form 5, and that's what the application looks like. Now, this is what it looks like in the online portal. I'll show you the paper copy in a moment. But what I wanted to show right here is to be sure when the are you applying for, that's question number 1, be sure that you choose economic injury in that box. So here's what the form looks like. You'll need to put, and then as far as putting the economic injury declaration number and all of that stuff, it looks like we're going to take care of that for you. But again, here you see in that box 1, be sure to choose economic injury. And then the next part, you're going to say what kind of business you've got. Again, if it's a sole proprietor, they do need to switch over to the 5C. Applicant's legal name, so that's going to be your business name. And then you'll have down here further, provide the names of the individuals to contact for, and what we've been told, be sure, please give a good cell phone number as well as a good email address, because the loan officers, as they're processing these applications, they will both try to email you and call you. So make sure, please provide a good cell phone number so they can call you. And again, the damaged property, there's no physical damages. So, but you still will need to put your business address. And then the next section of it is going to be about owners. So again, what we talked about is this is the 20% or more. There's only space here on the paper form for 1, I think. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to submit additional sheets. So either print this form off again, or just put some kind of another sheet with additional information for who else are owners or partners in your business. So here, and this is what it would have looked like in the portal. There is what we had was a page 3 in the portal. And it should be on the application. It's just a kind of a blank. Any additional comments or information? That's any other information that you want to share that you think may provide good information to the loan officer that's making the decision on the eligibility, how much the loan will be for. Anything that's relevant that you want to share at that point, please attach another sheet. There is a note here that if you do have partnerships, please make sure that you list your partners with their percent and make sure that it totals up to 100%. The personal financial statement. So this is what we talked about. This is for the owners, people with more than 20%. Again, I believe you can use your own, but we've got a form here, and I've got it pulled up on the next one, I think. No, I don't. So personal financial statements. You can have, if you've already got one, just send that with it. You don't have to use our form, just send that. So what we're looking at here is going to be information on your assets and debts. And I know we've had some questions on how to handle a husband and wife, so we'll get to that toward the end in our question and answers. I think we've got an answer for that at this point. But here's the things that it looks like. What do you have in your savings account? What do you have in your retirement? We're looking for liquid assets. So what it is that if we have this thing that we always say about SBA loans on credit available elsewhere. Well, when it comes to economic injury, we're not saying that could you go and get a regular loan at a bank. That's not what we mean. What we mean is, do you have enough cash on hand in liquid assets that you could keep the business going without our help? So that's what we're looking at. So you're going to have to put some of that information in here, as well as, what debts do you have? What notes are you paying on a monthly basis? They are going to ask things like when it was originated, what's the balance, and that kind of thing. The schedule of liabilities. So this is for the business. And so what we're looking at, and I do have this form next. We'll skip this. So here's what the form looks like. It's very simple. Who's your creditor? What was the amount? What was the date? Your balance? Are you current or delinquent? And what's your payment amount? So, but this is also too where you can put, what's your monthly payroll? What are your average utilities? That sort of thing. So, be sure to put everything in here that shows what you really are outlaying on a monthly basis from your business just to keep it open. So the 4506T, that again that's the request for the tax transcript from IRS. The thing that's important here, and I'm going to skip to the next one. Here's what the instructions are. And this is part of when you download those forms from our site. You're going to have to make sure that you get the business name exactly correct as it is with IRS, because if you don't put it, we can't take it if there's a mistake. So make sure you get the names correct as they are. And again, you're going to have it for all of the individuals or other entities, other business entities that have 20% or greater interest in this applicant. You need it for all your general partners and any affiliate businesses. Again, please make sure you get those their legal names correct. And I know that we kind of flew through that a little quickly, but we certainly wanted to make sure we've got time for lots of questions. I'm sure there are. I've seen the chat going, but I haven't had a chance to look at it and see what it says. So again, we're here to help you. Our resource partners are here to help you. We've got our cell phone numbers listed here because we're often not actually in the office. So please feel free to reach out to any of us. Janelle and Christy are the lender relations folks. So when you start getting into questions about, what do I put here, or how, if how's this going to work with the bank? Is this going to impact my current SBA loan? Feel free to reach out and they would be glad to help you. Wayne, are you able to speak yet?
Yes, I am. Can
great.
you hear me okay?
Yes, gotcha.
All right. Well, Sarah, you've done a really good job, I think, in terms of covering all of the basic information that we've encountered over the last, few days. I think at this point we could certainly open it up for questions. There was something I was researching kind of as the presentation was going, and it had to do with private organizations or the nonprofit category. I think what we've been hearing for the past few days is something I'm just going to echo, and we're going to suggest that if you think you are eligible, or if you've got a client that you think is eligible, whether or not it is a religious organization or a private organization a nonprofit that may be close, we're going to recommend they go on and apply. And here's an example. When I spoke with the Office of Disaster Assistance in the past few days, one of the things I recall is if the nonprofit, or let's say a church as an example, if they're operating a school, or if they're operating some sort of camp, something where it's a fee for services, then that economic aspect of their organization or their business, if you will, would be eligible for an economic injury disaster loan. So when in doubt, we're going to steer them to and suggest that they apply, and then they'll get clarity further in the process from the loan officer. And Sarah, that's all I have at this time.
So, Michael, you've been answering some of the questions that have been posted. Do you want to go through those and start bringing up the other questions and providing answers?
I was going to say, if someone asked if they already applied online, do they have to do everything all over again? And the question I have is whether you received a confirmation that your application was received on the portal. Because when a person, went to the portal, completed the form, there was definitely at the very end, after you submitted everything, a confirmation that your application was received. So if you got that confirmation, you're good. Other questions. One is from an insurance company, and something we need to reiterate is that disaster loans would take into consideration any other relief, let's say from the state. Here in Kansas, the state was offering 0%, financing for some restaurants and hospitality businesses. Our SBA funds, because it's tax dollars, we have to be diligent in not duplicating funds. But as far as the insurance company themselves, I mean, it's a business. And like I said, these funds are meant for businesses that have lost revenues and are not able to cover their ongoing expenses. So if whatever companies we're talking about here, if your revenues are, or let's say your expenses have shot up too, and you can demonstrate that you can't, service your debt and you can't, pay your ongoing expenses, that's exactly what this disaster loan program is for. It's to, make sure you can stay solvent, if you will. It's not meant to replace, profit margins at all. It's just meant to keep get the business back to the break even so that they can, keep the doors open, if you will, virtually over the next 6 months. And a couple other questions. Yes, you can pay the loan back early. There's no penalty. There's no cost for applying. And in fact, if you applied and you find out you don't need some or all of the disaster loan that was approved, you don't have to take it at all, or you can say, I only need X amount of the amount, of what was approved. So this is meant to be as, user-friendly as possible. And so it's really up to the business what they need. We still highly encourage everyone to apply because you don't know if 3 weeks from now, 4 weeks from now, you're going to be at that point where you're not able to cover your expenses, and so apply anyway, whether you think you'll need it or not. And if in the end you don't need it, or you only need 20% of it, then you don't have to take it. The interest, I don't know if it was mentioned, is very low. It's fixed. The term goes out 30 years, and no one has to pay their first payment on these loans until after the first 12 months. So the interest will start accruing, but only on what was dispersed. So let's see if there are any other questions.
Can
There's all
I,
this talk
interject,
about. Go ahead.
can I interject a couple of questions? First one was, there's been some word that some of these loans will be forgiven. Is this one of the ones that'll be forgiven if employees remain on the payroll?
Well, right now, we always that it's an act of Congress to change any federal program, including this disaster loan program. So if Congress indeed passes a new law and the president signs the law, into effect, then whatever provisions are in that law, we would adjust and abide by. I imagine, I mean, we don't know this, but it may be conceivable that all these applications that are being received, if the new law, changes the terms on this to make it forgivable or whatever, then of course, that's probably what would happen. And we don't know that because we don't, we're like you, we're reading the news as far as what's being considered. And, like I said, we shouldn't count our chickens before they hatch. Apply anyway, get the paperwork done. And I imagine for expediency, that changes and things like what you're talking about may be considered and that way, but we don't know.
So that then would mean that all the issues that relate to that kind of decision are also up for not yet determined, and you don't have answers. So the percentage that would be forgiven, the percentage of the wage, things like that, that'll all come with the congressional bill that passes for the stimulus.
Hey, Greg, just think the short answer here is we have to go by the program guidelines that are in place today. So all borrowers should expect to repay the loan today. And if something changes, and certainly that would be, that would be communicated to all of us at a later date. But right now, we've got to go by the program as it is, and all borrowers should expect to repay the loans.
Thank you, Wayne. Another question that I'd like that was earlier on, maybe it got missed, was we have a company that's talking about having been in business for 4 years and they were doing well, but with this situation, it's not clear what's going to happen, and they were actually closed. If they're already at maximum debt capacity with a 7A, they still will be able to qualify, but the question is, what will the amount be? And I think you mentioned that it was related to what the application process will provide, and that they'll have a choice to take that amount or some lesser amount. Is that correct? Uh-oh.
Michael or Sarah, you guys can go on and take that.
Sorry, I've been getting phone calls as we're talking here. This disaster loan is set from our program, our 7A, and if you will. It's in fact, we at the district office level don't even have access to the disaster, databases or anything. We can't see status of applications or anything. We're separated. The small business size standards still apply as far as, is it according to the NAICS code, or are they the North American Industry Classification System? Are they technically a small business? Those things apply, but we like the general answer is to apply anyway. And the processing of a loan takes some time, things may change with the law. Who knows? As Wayne said, we just have to go by what the program is right now, and so we're asking everybody, and like Wayne said earlier, even nonprofits that may or may not be eligible, please apply.
I want to go back to, I think, Greg, the question had to do with, you've got an existing business owner that has a 7A loan or or a small business loan. They believe they're at more or less their financial capacity, and they've been impacted, and they're wondering what they may qualify for. Was it something to that effect?
That and whether or not they can restructure their existing 7A and how that's all going to, if you know how that's all going to progress through the, the outcomes of the new.
Well, again, for now, so based on the programming and everything we have in place for now, first thing that the borrower can do at the moment, the SBA client can go directly to the lender and they can request to either have their payments deferred and perhaps have their loan restructured. SBA gives our lenders a lot of flexibility there, and certainly deferred payments is right now a top priority. So lenders have that flexibility to defer payments for 6 months immediately. I mean, that's in place right now.
Okay.
In terms of the economic injury disaster loans, so these loans, as Michael mentioned and as Sarah mentioned in the presentation, these loans are not intended to pay off or totally restructure debt. That's not the purpose of these loans, but those payments that the borrower or those payments that the business owner has and those other debts that they're going to document and submit, these loans are intended to help with the working capital needed to cover those and other operating expenses projected out 6 months. So, the short answer is these funds are intended to help with those temporary losses and I guess that inability to meet the current debt that the business has. These loans are intended to help cover those debts and to help the business to sustain through this disaster period. In terms of the other things that are on the horizon through the legislation that has been passed by the Senate and yet to be passed by the House, we believe and I anticipate there are going to be some additional resources and other programming that's going to come into play, but we just don't have all of those facts right now and how, ultimately those things are going to be implemented.
Thank you. I know that some of this was covered, but this is sort of a nuance on a different aspect. Another set of questions related to the SBA being advocating on behalf of the companies with insurance companies or dealing with penalties without paying off early. All those things are in the PowerPoint, but they can call you all and get answers to the best of your ability after this webinar, correct?
That is correct. I'm going to ask Sarah to jump back in. She's been doing such a great job, and I've been having the opportunity to just listen a little bit.
No problem. Another set of questions that came up were, can less than 20% of the owners submit if it improves the application?
Yeah. Yes, I think information, the better.
So less than 20% of the owners can submit an application? I thought it had to be all owners.
No,
I think there's, yeah, go ahead, Michael.
No, I was going to say, go ahead, Sarah. We were going to say something. I interrupted.
So I think what they're asking is if they're an owner, but they don't have 20% or more ownership of the company, they only have 15% ownership, can they still submit their information to support the application? And I would say yes.
Cool. A couple more questions that I'll answer again at the end, but this is being recorded and we will send, for everybody that registered, we will send them a copy of the PowerPoint and in a day or so, a link to the video audio recording from this session. Another question that was interesting was I was able to get an application put in through the online portal this past weekend when it was open. It says I can't check through the portal now. Is there a way to get a copy of that application that I sent?
We don't know that yet.
No. Well, the problem being that the portal is so heavily being used that they can't get in.
Right. If they submitted an application and they received confirmation that it was received successfully, they should have received a message, or I don't know if there's a confirmation number or whatever. But if they receive that, then there is an email address that they can you know email, and the phone numbers, of course, they're being bogged down right now. But um, they can reference that confirmation in via email or a phone call to see the status of things. As far as getting a copy, right now with the volume of what we're trying to process and trying to help people, uh, I wouldn't even ask for that, because we're trying to help as many small businesses as possible. And the main thing that should make them sleep better at night is knowing that, yes, they did get the confirmation that their online application was received successfully. If it wasn't, if they never got that, then I would suggest that they go through the new route now of unfortunately, having to fill out the PDF versions of the application and submit them via email or regular post.
So another question that was listed was, is a digital signature on the form acceptable? And I'm assuming that if you fill out the form, you got to sign it with ink and pen, not a digital signature. Is that correct?
I think we should get clarification on that, because before the portal went down, um, they were accepting a signature done through the portal. So previously, it needed to be an ink signature, but we need to get clarification if they're going to take electronic signature on the form.
Okay. And regarding another question was CBD stores, are they able to apply?
Yeah, it's a legal retail establishment. It's a business, um, and so I would say yes, apply.
That's to your knowledge. Thank you. On personal balance sheets, how do we account for assets, liabilities that are shared as a married couple? So in other words, if I'm assuming that the question is really, if one member of a husband-wife team applies and they have joint assets, how do you deal with
The couples, husband and wife, whatever, that uh, are co-owners of a business, yes, they would complete that as a couple. So the checking account, savings, mortgage, all that stuff would be as if they're one unit, a married couple. And if you notice at the bottom of that form, there are two signature lines. So both the husband and wife, or husband and husband, whatever, they would both sign that. And so yes, that is it should be
it?
considered.
So if
Yeah.
there's any issue with the reporting of assets and things, they should call and ask in the process, correct?
They should, but I think what we've received is that co-owners of a business, uh, a married couple they wouldn't have to complete uh, and figure out how to divide, their shared assets on two separate forms. They would, you know, their checking accounts, their savings, home mortgage, all that information would be on one form. There, like I said, there's two signature lines at the bottom of the form. They both sign it. And if there's another business that one of them owns, that other business, needs this assistance, then of course that's a separate form for that, for the other business. But married couples, as far as that personal financial statement is concerned, would shouldn't have to rack their brain as far as how to divide the assets, because they're married.
Thank you. A number of other questions related to charities and franchises regarding charities, as I understand it, please validate that nonprofits are qualified, and as would the franchises, which are just another business form. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then, so as far as the franchises go, if it, what our understanding is, they need to be an acceptable franchise through SBA, and there's 3,000 plus franchises in the SBA franchise directory. So as long as it's not one that is specifically ineligible, and there are a few of those, then yes, franchises should apply.
Thank you. Another question came through is related to if the owner wants to use the proceeds to increase inventory. You mentioned that this was not intended as anything but to keep the business alive and pay operating expenses. But what if they have to buy additional inventory? Are they going to be able to do that with the proceeds?
Michael, do you have any input on that one?
I would say, I mean, the business can put that information on there, but I don't know how they're going to interpret that, because the idea of buying more material, I mean, there's a difference between having to change vendors to just keep inventory, and let's say the new vendor, it costs 20% more than their old vendor, and their old vendor is no longer online because of the disaster. Then that difference in cost would be applicable. But the idea of this disaster loan being used to finance more inventory to essentially make more profit or revenue because of the disaster, I don't think that would apply. That's not the intent of the disaster loan. This is really meant for businesses that, because of either lost revenue sales or higher expenses because they lost their supplier and they had to get a different source, and it's added to their costs just to stay open. That's what this loan is meant for. It's not meant for financing businesses that will possibly be able to grow because of this disaster, which business owners should take advantage of situations, but this is not the intent of the SBA Economic Injury Disaster Loan.
That's something we probably, I've had a number of people calling and asking within the SBDC about how they fund, if they're an essential business, how they fund that expansion. And it's a different set of problems, I guess.
Yeah, and the Fed, by the way, they're making sure that our banks, lenders have liquidity. It's a tremendous amounts of money being allocated for these interbank overnight loans, just to keep liquidity going. So they need to please go to your lender to ask for the financing for that, and especially if you can show that this product or service is going to be needed now more than ever, and we want to invest in that, and this is the
Thank you.
case why it's going to credit from a lender. That's not the intent of this loan, of the disaster loan.
There's another really interesting question. What are firms that offer temporary services or employee, contract employees for other companies? Are they included in all of this disaster loan capability?
This has to do with the expenses of the business, and not having the revenues or resources available to cover their ongoing expenses.
Right. I would jump in here on this one, Michael. So it sounds like a staffing company, and perhaps the staffing company now has suffered losses as a result of, the change with their particular service or their customers. So the short answer to that would be yes. They would just have to demonstrate through their financials that there are losses now that are directly related to COVID-19. So yeah, I think they would be eligible.
Okay, thank you. There's only a couple more questions that we haven't really covered. Just to clarify, the only the participant only completed Form 5 through the portal, but was unable to complete the rest of it before the portal went down, and has not received an email. So did they just call, or what do they do?
Yeah, I was about to respond to that, and I probably will anyway, so it's on the record that if they didn't complete the application, that uh, they need to unfortunately submit, the complete package, all the forms that are necessary via email or mail at this point, and not count on, a customer service, loan officer just going off that one form, because, that's right now. I imagine the SBA disaster staff are concentrating on, complete packages, processing them as fast as possible. Uh, and I imagine this situation may be at the end of the line. And so to save time, unfortunately, we really apologize for the website issue, but I would highly recommend that they, hopefully they save the data and can replicate it and then complete all the necessary forms to have a complete package. And then
So,
mail it or email it.
so you're reminding people to save along the way to avoid having issues with having to recomplete the application. Thank you. Another question that came up the other day, but has come up again here is, what if somebody owns multiple companies? Can each company apply?
If the companies involved are not able to meet, due to, like I said, lack of revenue sales, they're not able to meet or be able to cover their monthly expenses for the 6-month period, that those businesses should apply. The question is whether, like, the person has 3 businesses, but 2 of them have shared management, shared resources, then one application, because it's essentially the same business, would be one application. And let's say that's a store, and then that person also owns a cell phone shop, retailer. Well, those are not related businesses, and they'd be separate entities. So therefore, there'd be 2 different loan applications. But once again, it has to do with whether each of those businesses are able, or they think it will be in question that they won't be able to cover their expenses to remain solvent.
Okay. Another question that probably is germane. I don't remember hearing it. What's the timeline? As I understood, it was supposed to be about 3 weeks to get approval, and then a week or so to disperse funds. Can you update that?
So we cannot. All we can say is that that was the estimated time. We do think that as the more come in, that it's, it could have stretched a little bit longer. So unfortunately, we just don't have we really don't have anything that we can say other than it'll be several weeks.
Thank you. There's a whole bunch of questions that continue to be added, and we're out of time. But what I will do as part of the putting this together and sending it out is with the questions and answers, especially the ones where we were answered or that were unanswered, we will include them in the material we send out to the people that registered, hopefully with some answers. So I'm going to draw a close to the call and ask if Wayne, Sarah, Michael, if you have anything else you want to add to before we close, and reiterate your phone numbers are on the PowerPoint, and they will be on the information we're going to send out here shortly for everybody that registered for this call.
No, I just want to thank you, Greg, for helping, and taking the lead on coordinating these calls. Hope the information's been helpful for everyone, and reach out to us. You've got our contact information. I want to thank everybody again for being on the call. So thank you.
Thank you all. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to email me. This is Greg Panicello. You registered. You got it. Hopefully you got the invitation somewhere. Follow it back, and we'll be more than happy to follow up with you. Thank you.